friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here today to talk about starting seeds, especially those hard to grow things. And those hard to grow things are going to all be dependent on your area and what naturally is going to grow there. So the example I always try to give is that years ago when I first got serious about wanting to grow medicinal herbs, and I started putting in things like I wanted to grow marshmallow and I wanted to grow echinacea and a few other things, and I thought, okay, I'll just buy the seeds and throw them in the ground and they'll grow. Well, that's always the worst way to go about it, no matter where you live, unless you know for certain those things grow like weeds in your area. Because there's a few things. Is if you're not familiar with what the plant looks like when it first starts coming up from seed, when it first germinates, first starts growing, and you just, put these seeds in the ground, you might forget where it was you planted them. You might forget what's there unless you put markers. And you might not know if what's coming up could be weeds or something else that might have fallen in that soil. So my personal opinion is always best to start with separate little pots. I always use the little 2-inch planting pots that you'd start seeds in. I use those for my tomatoes. I use those for everything, but especially any new herb or other type of plant I'm going to grow. And then I mark the pot so I know what's in there. And that way I can, I'm starting with fresh soil. I know positive sure has no other seed in it other than what I'm putting into it, so that when I see things growing in that pot, I'll know what it is. Now with marshmallow, it took me a few years to finally get it to not only just germinate, but to be able to grow. And the first year, I don't know if I ever got anything. I never saw anything growing in those areas where I planted the echinacea, the marshmallow, and I can't remember what other herbs. Echinacea in particular, at least for us, is one that even when I save my own seed from my own plants that I've been growing for years and years, it still has a low germination rate. And I always still, when I want to make new plants, always start them in pots indoors in a south-facing window. Now, if you don't have a south-facing window, it is good to have grow lights. But if you have a good south-facing window that can get plenty of natural sunlight, you don't have to have grow lights. I've never used grow lights to start any of my herbs, tomatoes, peppers, anything. So I always recommend doing it that way. Now, it's still, even doing it that way, it could still take a few years of getting the right seed that's going to grow in your area. So the marshmallow, coming back to that, it took me a few tries. When I finally figured out this is what works, starting at small pots, letting it grow, moving it into the greenhouse when it got warm enough, letting it grow some more. Once they got big enough, I could move them into a little bit bigger pots outside, and it was warm enough outside. I did that. And then the next year, once they were well established, I was able to dig them up and then plant them in the ground where I wanted them. I've had marshmallows ever since. In fact, now they easily self-seed, and I get marshmallow plants coming up everywhere. I'm constantly having to pull them up. So even after a few years of really struggling to get marshmallow, I finally got some, and now I'm never without them. And then I went through the same thing with mullen. The difference was with mullen, I could get it to germinate. It would only grow just a little bit, and then it would just quit, and it would sit like that for a couple months and then finally just die. And that was me putting it in pots. That was me following all the same regimen that I do for starting any other seed. Horehound, any other type of mint that I started from seed. Even lavender, I started lavender that same way. Lavender is another one that can be tricky. It doesn't have a high germination rate, but using that method works good for lavender. However, with the mullen, I just could not get it to grow, even in the greenhouse. Because our area is very wet and cool. And then I managed to get a couple of years ago some seed from a friend who had moved here from the other side of the state where the climate is opposite. So one side of Washington is cool and wet, the other side is very hot and dry in the summer. And she managed to bring some seed from over there that had fallen into some plant pots that she didn't know that had fallen in there. She brought the pots over. The mullen started growing the next season, and she was really excited to see that. And then when it started putting off seed, she saved that seed and gave me some of that seed. So it had a full year to fully acclimate before it even put out seed. So that seed did great for me. I did all the same methods, starting it in small pots and then moving it to the greenhouse. And then when they got big enough, I was able to put them some in pots on my deck and some directly in the ground. Though I lost a couple over the winter, I still have a lot of mullen plants, way more than I need. And so it can work, but there's a couple of things, and one is just being very careful and very particular about how you start them, using the small pot method and then graduating into bigger pots, and then if you want, eventually into the ground. That way you can really control what's in the soil, you know what it is that's coming up, and it gives it a chance to actually acclimate to your area. Then once the plant is acclimated, you should never have to worry about starting it from seed again, because you should, I say, like I say with echinacea, I still have to start. It does not self-seed easily here because it's just so cool. It needs a more controlled climate to be able to get it going. And once I've got a good plant, then I can transplant it. But then the other half of that is getting acclimated seed. So you could be trying seed from here, there, and everywhere, and it might take a while to find seed that's actually already been acclimated to your area, just like with a mullen. I haven't had the same success yet with moringa. I've tried it a few times. I've tried even buying some dwarf moringa. It just does not like it here. It either doesn't germinate at all, or if it does, it doesn't make it, just like my first attempts with the mullen. So if growing that particular plant is very important to you, keep trying, don't give up. And then if it still doesn't work using the original methods, look to see if you can find someone in your area that is already growing that plant and see if you can buy some seed from them. Even if there's someone that doesn't normally sell seed, they might be willing to even just give you some off their plant, but be willing to pay for the seed. Now, even though I've always used the little 2-inch pots, because we have a big south facing window in our living room, and that's always a perfect place for me to start seeds. I've always used little black 2-inch pots to start all of my seeds, my tomatoes and more, because of the grandbabies, and the bench I normally use is just too easy for them to get into, and Rowan absolutely loves to get into dirt and throw it everywhere. All of my grandbabies now being mobile, I needed to come up with another method. So I've shared this a few times, I'm going to share it again. What I decided to do, I had to hunt to find something that was just the right size, that also had a tray with it, so that I could set this in the windowsill, right in the windowsill, what was far more out of reach of the grandbabies, but still is getting lots of that sun. And so I found these little succulent pots like this, and they look nice and a lot better than the cheap plastic ones. And so I'll be starting this late winter, early spring. I'll be starting my seeds in these in the windowsill. I did a sample with them using some chia seed, worked great. So I'll be doing the same thing. My only concern is with the tomatoes. I'll probably have to transplant them into bigger pots a lot sooner because they don't have as much depth for the roots. But as long as I can get them started in here and then move them into the pots in the greenhouse, which is typically what I do with tomatoes. And if you'd like more information on how I do that, I'll link to my video, the last one I did where I went from seed to harvest, I think, something like that, or transplanting, whatever that video was. I'll link to it down below. But I do kind of a series where I start them inside in small pots, move them into bigger pots in the greenhouse where they can be up out of the way of the chickens until I'm ready to block the chickens off entirely. Then I put my tomatoes in the ground where they're going to have a lot more room to grow. So that's what I'm doing. I can't say yet, and I'll give you updates on this down the road, how well it's going to do for all seeds, but at least for starting various different herbs and whatnot, I think this is going to work just fine. And my peppers, my Chinese 5-color peppers are my favorite ones to grow, though I might be trying some new peppers this year. We'll see. This coming season. So I'm kind of excited. I've had a whole year break from planting and having to grow. The things that you see growing behind me are all perennials. I got grapes, I got blackberries that were coming in from the ground on the other side, and I got some blueberries in pots and herbs in pots, and then I have my whole big garden out there that's also got perennials growing in there, and then a big empty section that just doesn't have anything growing but a bunch of lady's thumb and maybe some plantain and a few random things that have come up in there, like some sunflowers that came up on their own. So I am looking forward to this next year. I'm going to be trying a few new things. I'll keep you updated on that. But at any rate, this video was more about helping people to think of some other ways of getting some of those hard to grow seeds started, and just keep trying. And then if you can't get it to grow, remember there's many other great herbs out there that have very similar properties. I mean, like the mullen, I really decided I really wanted to grow the mullen. However, we can easily go out and get usnea off our other piece of property right off the trees if we wanted to. And that also is very beneficial to the lungs, the way mullen is. So sometimes it might just be find an herb that does has very similar properties, that already grows in your area. I can guarantee that everybody has something. Like everybody may have an herb that's really great for pain that grows better in their particular area than maybe in somebody else's area. And so you got to look at all that. This is why I do videos where I compile different herbs and more for things. Like I have one for pain, I have one for that, of things to help with lung health, things to help with diabetes, things to help with high cholesterol, so that you can see all the many things out there. It doesn't mean you have to use them all. It just means finding the thing that's most accessible to you, most easy to grow if it's going to be an herb, and something that naturally already grows in your area, is already wild in your area. Then from there, finding which one's going to work best for you. That's how you want to look at it. And sometimes I wasn't really going to worry that much about the mullen because of the usnea, but then I decided I did really want to grow it. And I'm glad I did. And I'm glad I was able to finally do it. And it is nice to have a few different herbs that do the same thing, just because of the fact that, again, different herbs will work better for different people. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, gave you a few ideas, and any other thoughts and suggestions you'd like to share, please put those in comments down below. Remember, those comments do help us out too, besides just giving us all new ideas, including myself, and things to ponder. So thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.